Hello, everyone, and greetings from the World Data Forum and the beautiful Hangzhou in China. I'm very happy and pleased to be with you all here to talk about recent efforts to innovate and modernize the way we produce time use data and time use statistics. These are data that are critically important to inform a very broad range of policies and research questions, including on gender equality, unpaid household service work, and well-being. This is also an opportunity for us to update you on the work of the United Nations expert group on innovative and effective ways to collect time use statistics and the recent efforts to ensure that many countries can adopt the latest light solutions to produce this important set of information. I'm Francesca Grum. I'm Assistant Director at the United Nations Statistics Division, where I'm in charge of demographic and social statistics. And I'm very pleased to be together with colleagues and friends today to talk about this important topic. Without further ado, let me introduce the panelists today. It would be good if you can share the screen so that we can see our panelists. There is Lisa. Yes, thank you so much. So we have Patricia Hall. Patricia is a time use survey manager in Statistics Canada, and she's also the current chair of the United Nations expert group on innovative and effective ways to collect time use statistics. Thanks, Patricia, to join us from Canada. We have Lisa Scanlon, who is the director in the Household Surveys branch of the Australian Bureau of Statistics, ABS. Thank you, Lisa. And I'm very happy to have my friend and colleague, Samantha Watson, who works at the International Labour Organization. Samantha is a labor statistician in the statistics department at ILO. Thank you, Samantha. We also have a fourth speaker, Ms. Graciela Marquez, who is the president of the National Institute of Statistics and Geography, INEGI, in Mexico. Ms. Marquez couldn't make it. She couldn't join us, but thankful she sent a recorded video. So I think we can start with Graciela video, if you can play that. Thank you.
Social and gender statistics session for organizing this panel. My name is Graciela Marquez, and I'm the president of the National Institute of Statistics and Geography, INEGI of Mexico. I'm happy to talk about the time use statistics as a key information sources for the design, monitoring, and evaluation of policy related to well-being and gender equality. Let me start by saying that after Cuba, Mexico was the second country in the Latin American region to conduct statistical surveys on time use. Our experience started back in the 1990s when information on time use was collected in a module of the National Survey of Household Income and Expenses. It was until 2009 and thereafter that INEGI conducted the Time Use National Survey. In 2010, we developed the Mexican classification of time use statistics, which is comparable and interoperable with the International Classification of Time Use Statistics, ICAPS. But our classification goes deeper in aspects of interest to Mexico, concerning mainly unpaid work, intensification of care, among other causes. In 2024, we will apply the survey again with some updates resulting from this year's public consultation regarding three aspects. First, the adjustment of the survey to better serve the satellite account of unpaid household work 2, improvements on the target population to capture economic dependence and population with disabilities, among others. And third, classifications recommended by the UN expert groups on time use statistics, for example, with respect to passive care. The Time Use National Survey aims to provide statistical information for the measurements of all forms of work of individuals, both remunerated and not remunerated, to make visible the importance of domestic production and its contribution to the economy, the way women and men use their time, or regarding to the population aged 12 years and over. Regarding the impacts of the survey on the public debate and policymaking, let me point out a few examples. In 2019, the survey supported the modification of the federal labor law to establish domestic workers' rights, as well as the obligations of employees to guarantee them decent work. It also contributed information to support the reform of the federal law on public employees to grant paid paternity leave. It set the National Program for Gender Equality 2019-2024 with indicators on time use. Also, in the near future, the survey will provide the data to back the proposal for a national care system in Mexico, which seeks to balance the burdens between women and men and provide care to priority groups. To date, time use data has chiefly helped to underscore the value of unpaid care and domestic work carried out mainly by women. However, there are other policy dimensions still unexplored in which time use data can also yield meaningful insights. For instance, time use statistics can have a significant impact on health, and how we spend our time can affect our physical, mental, and emotional well-being regarding 1, physical activity, 2, screen time, and 3, work-life balance. INEGI coordinates the National System of Statistical and Geographic Information, which constitute a direct line of communication with data users from the federal and national governments, academia, among others. The law provides internal guidelines and rules to produce information in which public consultations are included. This year, INEGI will launch a public consultation to update the National Time Use Survey towards 2024. Once the public consultation is completed, we analyze and publish a public report with all the comments and observations in our website. This process is key to the enrichment of the time use survey and a good practice adopted by the system. In conclusion, we have learned 3 main points. To address users' needs in a transparent, systematic, and objective way, our institutional arrangements are needed to maintain an open channel of communication and feedback with users. This feedback is vital to enrich and polish surveys methodological design, making it fit for purpose. 2, data use. No, desde arriba. Okay. 5, 4. In conclusion, we have learned 3 main points. 1, to address users' needs in a transparent, systematic, and objective way, institutional arrangements are needed to maintain an open channel of communication and feedback with users. This feedback is vital to enrich and polish the survey's methodological design, making it fit for purpose. 2, time use data has multiple lines of action, most of which are still underexplored. Connecting time use statistics with other accounts can lead to new measurement paradigms, especially concerning well-being. For instance, we can push for national accounting to evolve by incorporating satellite accounts to measure well-being and sustainable development. And 3, to sustain any effort and initiative in the long term, strategic partnerships are key. INEGI has developed a comprehensive network of strategic partners, both domestic and international. One of the longest standing partnerships is the one we have with Mujeres ECLA UN Women. Thanks to the participation of multiple stakeholders and partners, for the last 23 years, the annual meetings on gender statistics at our headquarters in Aguascalientes, Mexico, we become one of the most relevant spaces to promote dialogue between the national statistical offices, the institutional mechanisms for the advancement of women, and specialists from academia on the production and use of gender statistics. Thank you all, and have a successful World Data Forum in China.
Thank you so much, Graciela. I hope you are sleeping now, but maybe at one point you look at the session and you'll be happy to know that your intervention was fantastic. I just would like to highlight a few of the points you made, very, very useful on the concrete uses of time use data. I think you mentioned a few that are critical, important, but also on the policy impact, how data are used to really make a difference in people's life. You touched on the impact on the specific laws on domestic workers' rights, on establish a solid national care system. These are all very important elements. I also like the fact that you touched on the need for establishing a mechanism to have regular user-producers dialogue. These are all fundamental elements for ensuring that the data are produced, are fit for purpose, are used, and can make a difference. So with that, I thank you again, and I hope we'll see you in the next World Data Forum. Let's move to our second presenter, Patricia, if she's still with us. A quick question for you. Canada has committed to innovative and effective ways to collect time use data. Could you please share with us the experience of your country in this regard and point out related challenges and opportunities your office has faced? Thank you, Patricia.
Okay, I'll be sharing. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Francesca, for giving me the opportunity to share Canada's latest experience in collecting time use data. So today I'll do a brief overview of the time use survey in Canada, the changes over time, and innovation done for the 2022 time use collection, and some of the challenges we faced. So the time use survey has been running since 1986 and is collected approximately every 5 to 7 years at Statistics Canada. The last time that it was collected was in 2015, and collection is now ongoing for the 2022. It started in July 2022 to end in July 2023. In Canada, we have always collected time use survey using a computer-assisted telephone interview, so CATI method. We never used any left-behind diaries, and interviewers were coding the respondents' activities in the application as they went. Over the years, the list of activities expanded to culminate at 264 codes in 2010. The number of activities was drastically reduced in 2015. As I just mentioned, in 2015, the Canadian Time Use Survey developed a web diary for the first time as part of a multimode collection strategy. But this led in reducing the activity list to 63 plus one other specified.
Patricia, sorry, Patricia. Apologies.
Yes.
the slides are not moving and you are not in a slideshow. I don't know if you see that.
Oh. For me, I am. I'll just...
Yes, now the slides, you are on response categories 2015. Maybe you can
Yep.
put it in a slideshow so we see the slides on the left too.
That's how I am. So
Yeah, try that.
can you see it?
Well, don't worry. At least you are in the right slide. Let's see if it moves now. Thank you.
Okay, so the sequencing on the drop-down menu was done based on the most common activities done starting at 4 a.m. Is that one has moved? Can you see the other slide now?
We can't. I don't know if our colleagues can do anything from there. Or maybe you want to try to share again. Sometimes it's just a question of, of...
I can see it, Francesca, so I don't know if it's just a delay. Maybe it's a time delay thing.
Okay, now you move the slide, yes. Yeah, she did it. It's on her side, yeah. Okay, so you are on slide 5. Hold on a second.
Do you want me to just leave it as is, not in presentation mode then?
Yeah, I mean, leave it as is, and then we give it another try. Otherwise, just go on, and we will do it with it. Thank you.
Okay. When mixed mode collection started, different applications were required. But starting in 2017, Statistics Canada developed a new collection platform enabling the use of a single application for all modes. Creating a 24-hour diary in a web environment that has some limitations and needing to be user-friendly was challenging. The lessons learned in 2015 and a new questionnaire design tool allowed the 2022 time use diary to have many more activity categories. As the INEGI-México 2016 was very closely comparable with previous Canadian codes, we have decided to adopt the international classification as our coding tool starting in 2022. The categories were operationalized and presented in a hierarchical structure to make it easy for respondents to find a category that best fits their activity. After doing qualitative testing, where some respondents had trouble finding the activity they were doing, it was decided to provide more high-level categories for a total of 18 from the 14 available in INEGI-México and 122 low-level categories and one other specified option. This is a quick glance at how it looks on screen. So once selected, the high-level category opens up to more specific activities. Some follow-up questions were added for when respondents indicated that their main activity was unpaid work or care. As we did not expect respondents to understand or distinguish between the concepts of volunteering versus unpaid work, but recognizing how important it is to maintain a proper distinction between these categories in time use research, we have added these questions to be able to recode responses when necessary. For example, if a respondent reports that their main activity was doing unpaid household work, but in the follow-up questions indicates that this work was done for an unrelated person living outside of their household, the main activity would be recoded to volunteering rather than unpaid household work, just to be aligned with the international standards. In the past collection, we also found that eating was often underreported. So for 2022, we have added a follow-up question in case no eating episodes were recorded during the 24-hour reference period. Rather than asking the respondents to take on the high burden of going back through their diary and readjusting their responses to report their eating, We simply ask if they ate anything at all during their reference day, and if they did, approximately around which time of the day and for how long. Reaching out to respondents has always been a challenge, and effort was put on legitimating the survey and informing householders of an incoming telephone calls from a StatCan interviewer. Now that the population is bombarded by all types of surveys, coming from telemarketers, businesses, organizations, governments, and so on, more personalized information need to be prepared in complement to introduction letters. And it must be self-explanatory, as the first point of contact is now through mail or email. The survey must be sold as what's in it for me? What will I get out of this? To provide as much information as possible, we have developed a brochure showing past results and how data are used. In addition, we have developed short tutorial videos explaining what a 24-hour diary is and how to complete it. Using a 5-panel bilingual brochure, the challenge is to showcase what's good in the survey for the respondents, how responding will impact their daily life. A QR code was added to the brochure, providing immediate access to additional survey information. During qualitative testing, participants typically found most of their challenges with the diary. Therefore, we created a series of 3 short videos to answer some frequent questions about it. The videos explain what the 24-hour diary is, how to report simultaneous activities, and a reminder to avoid grouping multiple activities together, and how to report travel activities. Despite being very different from other StatCan surveys, the Time Use survey has had to use the generic collection management platform. This platform cannot be programmed to allow cases to be delivered based on the day of the week. As we could program emails to be delivered on specific dates, and we had valid email addresses linked to household, we innovated by using emails as the main survey invitation tool, which assured an equal distribution of cases by day. Using emails allowed us to continue using randomly assigned reference day. The invitation was sent the morning following the reference day, which was then followed by 3 reminders, each sent a week apart. On the 3rd week of collection, cases for which we had a phone number were also followed up by interviewers in CADI. For the telephone interviews, it was not possible to use a reference day approach. So to keep the cases within the time of the week and separated between weekdays and weekend days, we attach all the Monday to Thursday reference days and group them under weekdays, and the cases from Friday to Sunday reference days group under weekend days. So starting on the first CADI day, the reference day in the application became yesterday, where it was specific day in the application before. In Canada, to be accepted, a diary requires at least 3 episodes and 24 hours worth of activities. The application could meet the 24-hour condition, but couldn't manage the other requirement. Therefore, an edit flagging long episodes of 12 hours or more was added within the application, along with a travel edit, to remind respondents to record travel time and mode between activity if an activity location was changed. In previous years, the entire diary was coded by interviewers during the interview, and only few activities needed to be coded after the fact in the head office. Having a self-completion instrument led to a lot more inconsistencies that need to be resolved in the head office. Luckily, time use data trends are quite stable over time, and using unweighted data allowed us to compare overall time spent on activities to detect any inconsistencies. Overall time was following trends, but the number of episodes had decreased. Imputing the missing eating episodes using the follow-up questions helped the trend comparability for the eating activity and opened the door to additional editorial steps. Based on the diary responses, it was clear that for some activities, such as shopping or going to appointments, the travel time was included with the activity instead of being separated. Several steps were programmed to identify such cases and correct them. In conclusion, the innovation route taken by Statistics Canada to modernize its collection tool and platform helped the development of a user-friendly application for time use and challenged some of the limitations to find ways to follow international standards within Statistics Canada parameters. It also pushed us to rethink our respondent relation material to be more convincing about the importance of the data the survey offers, and uses current technology to provide an easy access to more information. Nonetheless, the time use survey collection remains a great challenge, and for Canada brings additional processing ones that were dealt with by having interviewers. Not having used paper diary in the past, the recoding process used by other statistical offices was never developed and needed to be created to assure data comparability over time. So I would like to encourage you to look at the information for respondents on our website. If you'd like to learn more about the Canadian Time Use Survey, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you and have a nice end of the Congress.
Thank you, Patricia. Thanks so much for sharing the experience of Canada and your personal experience. You have been working on time use surveys for long. Also for being honest and frank about the challenges that your office faced in this latest collection of time use data in 2022, so it's very recent, and also for sharing some of the solutions that you adopted. I would like just to point out that the information on the strategy adopted for reaching out to respondents, because we know that this is a very heavy type of household survey that is really facing a reduction in response rate. So being able to reach out to your potential respondents is critical to ensure a certain level of response rate. So congratulations on that, and I'm sure that there is a lot of interest also among other countries to learn from your experience. Thanks also for, or let me acknowledge the fact that you are using the international standards for the classification of time use statistics, ICATUS 2016. So I'm very happy to acknowledge that. Let's move to our next presenter, Lisa, who is online too. If you can show us Lisa, here she is. Thanks again, Lisa, from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, to joining us today. So Lisa, ABS also recently conducted a time use survey. Could you share with us the efforts in modernizing this important survey and how you ensure the quality of the data obtained? Thanks.
Thank you, Francesca, and thank you for inviting me to present. I'm hoping that everyone can see everything, but please sing out, Francesca, if not. So a little bit of history, I guess, to start with the Australian Bureau of Statistics and our journey with time use statistics.
Hold on, just 1 second. Hold on. Let's see if we can bring up your slides. Are you sharing?
I am sharing. Can you see? Oh,
okay.
Actually, hang on. I forgot to click the share button. Hang on a moment.
Okay.
Let me go back.
No worries. Let's test it.
No. Where am I? Am I still with you? Oh, hang on. Yes. Okay.
Let's see.
There we go.
Yes. Yeah, I think you are good to go. Yeah. Try
okay.
to.
Yes. I don't have PowerPoint on my machine, so I just have to scroll through. So hopefully it'll work. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So a little bit about the history of time use statistics, and I particularly want to talk about the history because it was big. It had a big influence on what we did. So ABS the first time use survey we conducted was in 1992, and then we had 3 other surveys, the last one being in 2006. Because of funding constraints, we did not proceed after 2006. And certainly these older surveys were very much the traditional interviewer-based surveys. We had leave behind paper diaries. We did a significant amount of data entry, editing, imputation of return diaries. We compared within the household to make sure they were consistent, etc. We collected time at 5-minute increments for a given 48-hour period, and we collected detailed information on main activity, location, secondary activity, for whom and who with. In November of 2018, the ABS received funding from the Women's Economic Security Statement to reinstate the time use survey. And in particular, they were interested in understanding the insight, or to gain insights into unpaid work, with a specific focus on caring, to understand the barriers to labour force participation, particularly for women, to look at flexible working arrangements and how they impact on that work-life balance. Also, the balance between work and other roles within a household, as well as obviously the health and well-being of Australians. So a couple of things that were important for us in modernising the Australian time use. One of them was, of course, the undertaking of surveys had moved considerably from 2006. We now had Cowie, web surveys were a big thing. We were also very keen to modernise TUS with the use of an online diary or an e-diary, and to adopt as many of the modern survey practices as we could. The funding we received was to conduct the time use survey annually, so we needed to have the system where we could roll the survey through every year very quickly. Previous surveys took about 3 years from beginning right through to the end. We didn't have that luxury. Also, of course, we had only a given amount of money, so we needed to make sure it fitted in within that funding envelope. Having not conducted a time use survey for many years, 15 years, as an organisation, we had lost a lot of our subject matter knowledge and expertise in time use surveys. We also hadn't engaged with the specific stakeholders about what was of particular interest. So there was a big, steep learning curve for us. And I do have to take the opportunity to thank our international colleagues, Patricia and Francesca, for their support in those early years, because learning from them was very, very useful. So our survey that was scheduled to go in the field for 2021 was going to be an online first survey with a self-completion electronic questionnaire followed by an e-diary. And for those who couldn't participate online, we were then going to fall back to the traditional CAPI, where an interviewer asked the questions in the home on a computer and leave behind paper diaries. Our data processing was going to be verbatim. We were going to do minimal amount of curation and imputation compared to previous years. And we also obviously needed to update and improve the activity classification. Australia does have its own activity classification, but it aligns well with the international ones because obviously the world had changed significantly over the last 15 years. The other driver to modernise the survey was to reduce the complexity in the outputs in particular. Time use surveys are very complex. We have multiple levels. We have the diary, the day level, we have activity level, we have episode levels, we have person level data. There's a lot of complexity, and one of the key things was to make sure that the users could use our information as best to the best of their experience. So for 2021, what we found was we chose an enumeration time which was impacted by COVID, obviously. There were a lot of restrictions in Australia. We couldn't send our interviewers out for the paper follow-up. Obviously, the e-diary and e-questionnaire path could progress as we planned, but we needed to mobilise very quickly for an enumeration process for that other part of the sample that didn't involve interviewers. So this involved sending out the paper diaries, leaving call cards in letterboxes, etc., to try and maximise that response. Interviewers conducted telephone interviews rather than the face-to-face in-home interviews. The other thing we found with the 2021 survey was that there was significant respondent burden. We were asking a lot of information. When we went out initially to the stakeholders, we had a lot of stakeholders who became very excited with the time use survey. So as well as the Office for Women, who were our funding partners, we had people such as the digital people interested, the environment people interested, Labor people interested, and all of them wanting to add extra content. And in an effort to accommodate all those, we found that our diary, if we think about it within the context of the paper diary, it doubled in size. We were asking questions about the devices people were using. We were asking who they were with, where were they, etc. Our analysis showed that some data items performed better than others. We also found that there was a difference between the e-diary and paper diary performance, and specifically we found that people responding in the e-diary tended to report fewer activities but over longer periods of time compared to the paper diary. And paper diary, we found that people were missing certain components of the diary as well. There are columns that weren't completed to the same level of efficiency. The other thing we found that even though we were doing minimal curation of diaries, the paper diaries, when they came back into the office, it was still very time consuming to code those. And it was open to interpretation where, when you're asking people to complete a paper diary verbatim, the way they describe things varied considerably across the respondents. One of the main findings was that we left a lot of our stakeholders disappointed, and we could not necessarily produce all the outputs stakeholders expected. So we still applied the same quality parameters to the outputs, making sure we achieve sample cell thresholds, etc., and our standard error thresholds. Just move on. Just have to find my mouse. Sorry. Oh, here it is. So we've taken since 2021, we have taken a pause on running the time use survey. As I mentioned earlier, this was to be an annual survey. Part of the reason for the pause was the ABS catching up on the household survey program that we had to halt because of COVID. There were many surveys that couldn't go in the field. Ours was one that could. So there's a bit of a catch up in our household survey work program. But also we wanted to take the opportunity to review our time use survey and use some of the learnings to make changes for our survey going forward. So the plan is for us to go in the field in 2024, July 2024, and some of the changes we are making based on our findings of the 2021 survey is to really try and reduce respondent burden by reducing content from the background questionnaire and the diary. We've really gone right back to fundamentals and had more discussions with the key stakeholders to understand what are the true things they want to measure from this time use survey, and came to an understanding and agreement with them that as soon as we start adding more content, we potentially remove quality starts dropping because of that burden. So that has been a very key driver in the changes we're making. The other thing, of course, was we do need to design a quick turnaround survey because we are planning to collect annually. A year is not a lot of time to plan, design, get in the field, process, publish, get back into the field, etc. We were focusing, as I mentioned, on the most important data items that are of interest to the stakeholders. The other thing we're doing is testing alternative approaches to collecting unpaid care, because that is one of the key data items of interest. In the 2021 survey, unpaid care was either reported as a main activity, which was fine. It's a care activity, it's a main activity. But as we know, a lot of unpaid care happens as a secondary activity, or what we might call passive care. We found secondary activities were not reported very consistently or very thoroughly. So we are exploring alternative approaches, and we're doing some testing for that now. And that includes things like actually asking directly if a child, or if someone who needed care, someone with a disability or illness or any other reason, was in someone's care whilst they were doing the main activity. So we're testing that at the moment. The other thing that was important for us was to improve our mobile design. We asked a lot of questions. There was a lot of confusion. There was also significant burden. There is a big difference between filling out something in an A4 paper where you've got a lovely grid layout versus when you're doing something on a mobile phone where you're scrolling through different pages. So that has been a big focus for us, is to make the e-phone, e-diary journey much more easy. We're also making one major fundamental change, is going by e-diary only. So we won't have paper diaries this time around. Paper diaries have a massive impact on our back of office work, keeping track of the diaries, making sure we send them out, making sure every diary that has been delivered to respondents is accounted for and ends up back in the office. Transporting the diaries, storing the diaries, coding the diaries. Paper diary was a significant burden, so we've made the decision to go e-diary only. And the other thing we're doing is having a good look at the activity list to make sure that we've got the right balance of activities, particularly on the e-diary. So we don't want an exhaustive list, but we obviously want a list that's intuitive, easy to find with the drop-down menus, etc. Moving on. So just to talk a little bit more about what we're planning for 2024, and to understand how Australia conducts our time use surveys. Households are selected from an address register. We have an exhaustive address register, and the first interaction households have with us is they receive a letter in the post informing them that their household has been chosen to be part of the time use survey. They receive a guide, what the survey is about, etc. There are telephone numbers they can call if they have further questions. This is followed up by a letter inviting them to go online and complete the survey. They have a unique login number, which once they go onto our website, they put in that number and it will open up the survey for them. We ask that one person in the household, a responsible adult, go online and complete the household questionnaire. We're calling it the TUSQ for everyone in the household. And then at the end of that survey, provide email addresses for everyone who's in scope of the survey in the household. So that's everyone aged 15 years and over. At a day or two before their allocated diary days, that everyone in the household will receive an email asking them to register and go online in preparation for completing their e-diaries. The diary opens the evening before their diary dates. Our diary start at midnight, and then they complete the diary for 48 hours. There is a reminder at the end of day one and at the end of day two to complete the diary, but after there will be a hard close yet to be decided, but we're thinking either 24 or 48 hours after their diary dates have closed. For people who cannot go online, and we know that there are people who don't have that facility, the option will be an inbound telephone interview. So those people will be asked to call the office. We will collect the first part, the task questionnaire, as a telephone survey, and then we will identify or notify them of a date that will be their diary date, and then we will make a follow-up call the day after their diary date to we'll walk through the e-diary as a recall diary, but interviewer led. So CATI is the option for those people, and it will be only a one-day diary. The other change we're making is that we are only conducting one sort of collection. In the 2021 survey, we collected at 3 different points over the year, and that was done specifically to try and account for potential seasonality. Our analysis showed that we didn't see any evidence of seasonality, so we're collecting at one point. That makes things a lot easier for our operation. Thanks. Okay, I think I've talked about the inbound CATI only. Other consideration, we acknowledge that there is potential bias in doing a COWI e-diary only and relying on the respondents to call us back for the CATI. So there will still be that portion of the population who don't respond to any of those prompts. So what we want to do is, well, what we're thinking about doing is extending the COWI survey period so that we can send out more reminders. We generally send out 1 or 2 reminder letters. We're trying to squeeze in a 3rd reminder. We have found in other surveys that helps. We're offering the option of CATI and the recall options, but we're also considering the possibility of very limited interviewer follow-up in targeted areas where we know we have low response rates, and that's based on the socio-demographic characteristics of those areas. And what that will involve is an interviewer knocking on the door, trying to collect contact details, if you like, of the respondents, trying to sell the survey, and then once we've got those details, completing that survey via a CATI and recall diary at a later date, the next day, potentially. So that is that's the end of my slide. So certainly 2021 was a great learning experience for us. There were a lot of challenges, but we are moving forward with a design that we think will be sustainable going into the future, and we're also hoping, obviously, that we get some very good outcomes for the next survey that we run.
Thank you so much, Lisa, and thanks for sharing the recent experience of your office in collecting time use data. I'm sure that many countries will benefit and can learn also from the lessons learned that you shared. Just pointing out that I'm impressed that Australia is planning to collect this data annually because you are going to produce a huge wealth of information, very granular, and for sure very timely. So congratulations on that. And also, I believe that moving towards e-diary and digital solutions is the way to go. So thanks for your intervention. We are running a little late, so I'm quickly giving the floor to our colleague from ILO, Samantha, who will talk about the piloting of light solution for time use data.
Hello, ni hao, everyone. Thank you for coming today. So I won't take too much time. I'll actually just start my timer so I don't keep us all late to the break. So my name's Samantha Watson. I'm from the ILO. I'm in the statistics department at the ILO. And I'm going to be talking today about modular time use measurement within labour force surveys. Let's see. Okay, so hopefully everyone is familiar with labour force surveys. If not, you can see I just put up a very, very brief summary here. So labour force surveys are the main source of statistics on labour market indicators, on job quality and working conditions for persons in employment and unpaid trainee work, and for labour underutilisation, unemployment and time-related underemployment. Hopefully after the previous speakers, I don't need to talk too much about a summary of time use statistics, but from the ILO perspective, the time use statistics are the main source of statistics in what we term participation in own use production work, production of goods, provision of services, as well as time spent in these forms of work, and then also total working time, so covering both paid and unpaid forms of work in this total working time concept. And so since 2013, there's been recognition at the ILO and in our standards that are produced through a very democratic process where countries get to vote on international labour standards for statistics. There's been a recognition that there's scope to combine the strengths of both time use surveys and labour force surveys through the development of modular time use measurement that can then be attached to a labour force survey. So most countries in the world undertake a labour force survey. You can see here, this chart is showing the last time that countries did a time use survey. You can see that not that many countries in low and middle income settings have done one very recently. And this is just showing labour force survey. So it's just to show you that we have this very strong labour force survey infrastructure in many countries of the world. Sometimes they're done on a continuous basis or other multiples per year, or at least annual. There are still some patches where we don't have labour force surveys, but there's not that many of them. So the idea is that by utilising countries' existing national labour force surveys, we can get some information on time use through a module attached. So just very briefly, just to introduce, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Okay. I suppose now I can move as well, actually, so that's quite nice. Just to introduce the conceptual framework. So this comes from the 19th International Conference of Labour Statisticians, which is how all of our standards at the ILO for statistical standards are invented. You can see this is our forms of work framework, and it's divided into own use production of goods, own use production work of goods and of services. We're mostly concerned with the service portion today. Employment, which is work for pay or profit, unpaid trainee work, other, and then volunteer work, which is then subdivided according to the unit of production. And then, of course, we also have things that are outside of this classification of work, which are classified as non-productive activities. And this corresponds to the International Classification of Activities for Time Use Statistics, which you've heard a little bit about today already, so I won't go into detail on. But just to say that these two conceptual frameworks are very much aligned, which is obviously very important for standardization internationally. Okay, so just quickly on the benefits of this. So prior to the new conceptual framework on the forms of work, much unremunerated productive activity was just really hidden. So we didn't collect it at all in labour force surveys, and now we do. So this is obviously using a sort of an iceberg metaphor. It also means that we're able to account for multiple productive activities within one person for specified reference periods. So people aren't just doing one form of work, they can be doing multiple forms of work at once, and these just forms of work again. And it also permits divisions of labour and multiple sources of livelihood to be recorded at the household level in a much more detailed way. And it highlights the social impacts of unpaid productive activities for communities and households, here with reference specifically to a broader classification of volunteer work. So just talking a little bit about the specific piloting efforts that we've been doing. So I just wanted to acknowledge the support that we've had from Data2X here. We've developed sort of a range of what we term light time use modules for attachment to labour force surveys. And they've been developed in a kind of a toolkit way. So when we release them later this year, they will be also issued as a toolkit integrating national adaptation guides and training modules and curricula and things like that. So it's going to be a very practical toolkit. And just to say as well, all of the work that I'm talking about today is integrated into the global UN work that you've been hearing about also from Francesca. Just in terms of the strategy for the pilot. So we had several starting positions. I'll just bring everything up. So we had several starting positions. As I mentioned, we're focused on developing these tools for use primarily in low and middle income settings. And so the idea is that they should be interviewer administered face to face. That's just based on what we know about the effectiveness or otherwise of leave behind diaries or of web-based or app-based solutions in these settings. So the idea is that it's face-to-face, but we've developed a CAPI module, which is actually quite an innovation. It's developed in CS Pro, so it's interviewer administered, but it's developed for computer-aided personal interviewing. So we used a 24-hour or yesterday recall reference period for our light diary, but we're also testing a stylized listing. And that's really just because different regions tend to have different preferences about the format that they use. And we wanted to make the tool available in both those formats. We used fixed episodes. So in a diary, you can either have open episodes where you record the start and end time openly, or you can have fixed episodes. We used a fixed episode of 15 minutes, which is really a compromise. It's really as low as we wanted to go. And we had a pre-coded activity listing harmonized to INEGI-México. As we've refined the tools, we've refined the listing. We went from 35 to 41 to 48 to 50, and now we're going back again after all the piloting's been complete. So we're trying to condense it as much as we possibly can. It appears as a drop-down list for the interviewer to select from based on the verbatim response of the respondent. One of the key things that we were looking at testing is the measurement of simultaneity and multitasking, which you've heard a little bit about. So you know that it's a key priority for much time use research. We also prioritized looking at the implications of the probabilistic pre-assignment of a designated diary day. You heard a little bit about that from both Patricia and Lisa today. It's an important thing for field operations, and particularly when you're integrating into a parent survey, you have to balance the needs of having this representativeness across days of the week with not diminishing your response rate. So really just balancing those different trade-offs in terms of where you might be introducing error or bias into your sample. It's complicated further by the bar on proxy reporting for the time use module. Some countries do still use a degree of proxy for their labour force survey, but we would want to prohibit that for a time use diary. It would not be appropriate. And of course, that eligible population is based on the parent survey, the LFS. So depending on the country, that will be age 14 or 15. Our field testing had several different phases. It was primarily in India and Lesotho, and then we did a small-scale survey trial in Indonesia at their invitation. They asked if they could trial our module. We began with qualitative phase, so REA, rapid ethnography, and then cognitive interviews in India and then Indonesia. And we had a survey experiment 1 in Haryana in India. And this was comparing the alternate field protocols for the designated diary days. We wanted to see how simplified we could make them without reducing data quality. And we also looked at comparing the concordance of estimates for 2 different diary tools. In a second survey experiment in Lesotho, we had an experimental design comparing 2 alternative instrument formats, the light diary and the stylized. And then we had our small scale trial in Indonesia. Oh, and we're just planning at the moment, actually, a final round of cognitive interviews in Lesotho. I'm going to just talk a little bit about emerging lessons because one of the major benefits of the Light survey and the CAPI tool is the immediacy of the data. So with the old-fashioned kind of diary, you would have verbatim activities listed, and you would have to then have a coding exercise. Because we have our pre-coded activity list, and because we have our closed temporal episodes, the time from data collection to data turnaround and analysis is much shorter, but some time is still needed. So just to preface this, these results are preliminary. But just in terms of the emerging lessons, so we did find that on sort of standard data quality checks, we did have good performance. So we had an average of 31 activities for the 24-hour reference period. Thank you, which is very good. And the mean duration was 38 minutes for waking time and 54 minutes for all time. We only had 0.2% of activities reported as don't know or can't remember. And then 0.3% of activities were recorded as other specify. So this just indicates that the activity listing was quite solid that we were testing. Anything that was recorded as other specify obviously was assigned to the rec code ahead of analysis. So just to say that the pre-coded activity list did perform well, but we're just further refining it. In terms of the fixed episodes, so 38% of activities were recorded within the single 15-minute interval. We had some questions as to whether it should be 15 minutes or whether 30 would be more accessible for countries to use. I think the conclusion is that the 15-minute interval is appropriate. So in terms of these taken for granted aspects of caregiving, so we looked very closely at this. This was a major area to make sure we're covering all the different dimensions of caregiving. We're not underestimating total caregiving time. We did find that in line with the established findings that the single activity approach was the most limited of the different approaches that we tried. So results did get improved when we included direct recovery probes, which is something that Lisa was talking about in the Australian experience as well. So we found that increased the reporting by up to 30%. In terms of maintaining high response rates in the presence of the additional sample design considerations, so this is, I mentioned, is the bar on proxy reporting for the time use module, as well as the probabilistic assignment of diary days. We found that scheduling the appointments to accommodate the respondents combined with the substitution protocol, so we did permit substitution within certain procedures. We found that we did maintain the high response rates, but that's something I think it will be important to consider more at scale. Obviously, when you're running a trial such as this, you can see our sample sizes here are in the thousands. It's easier to control these things. Once we scale up, I think it's going to be extremely important to look at how the maintenance of the procedures for capturing sort of hesitant respondents go. I'm just including some relevant resources here. They relate to the ILO resources, but also to the wider time use community resources. People can take a picture if they're interested. And that's it from me. My email address is here if anyone would like to follow up. And I think I've kept to time. So thank you very much. Shishi.
So thank you. Unfortunately, we are going to be kicked out from the room. There is another session coming in a few minutes. But I maybe would like to see if there is any pending question, maybe one question for our speakers. We have Lisa from ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Patricia from Canada, and we have Samantha from ILO. Please.
Presentation about time use survey. You've done a lot of work about the modernization of time use survey and contributing a lot to the development of the new ICATS guidelines. And China conducted time use survey twice in 2008 and 2018 respectively, and will conduct the third time use survey in 2024. So we are happy to learn from your international experience, and NBS will hold a hybrid meeting with international expertise in October 2023. So we would like to invite you to our meeting online to share your experience. So two simple questions. One question is about how do you see the future of time use survey and the possibility of including the monetary value of unpaid work into GDP calculation? And the second one, how to reduce the complexity of time use survey effectively. Even though we did a lot of work to simplify the diary, but it's still too complicated and time consuming compared to other kinds of survey. So, which is a great challenge for the responsible rate. That's my two questions. Thank you again, and looking forward to your response.
Thank you. Maybe Samantha, do you want to start answering? Maybe just 1 minute if you can. You need this, and then I hope, can you show us Patricia and Lisa so that we have an interaction?
Yes, I will. Perhaps if I speak to the question of simplification, which is something that our work has really been focused on, there's a lot of for a long time now to them compared to household sample surveys, both at the data collection stage, so for the respondents, but then also at the analytical stages, as you've heard. So our work is really focused on simplifying as far as we possibly can. So I think the light approach, where you have pre-listing of activities, is the simplest and most effective way to simplify compared to a verbatim diary. It simplifies the data collection stage, it simplifies the data analysis stage. It does require very intensive interviewer training though, and that needs to be taken into account if you're doing obviously interviewer-based. We have the benefit that we're doing the fixed episode as well. And I think the major advantage in the move towards more high solutions, so diary to collect the diary day, the designated diary day, having these really probe on some of the more complicated aspects, such as supervisory care, past that focus to children, and that's something that we're doing well to include for adults as well. As we see aging populations more, a lot of solutions that are there and ready, but it's always right to tell you what they did during their diary day, whether it's stylized, whether it's diary. You can't get away from the fact that assess burden and complexity, but you can move to lighten it. I'll leave it there, but we can follow up after.
Thank you, Samantha. Patricia, Lisa, anything you want to add to answer to the question on the future of surveys? Can we lighten them even further? 1 minute each. Thank you.
Certainly from the Australian context, we are trying to minimise the burden, and what we're doing for that is really taking it back to basics and trying to understand what is it that is really important to measure. What are the key data item requirements? So, for example, in our second survey, we are not asking location, we are not asking mode of transport, because they are not the key fundamental things we want for our survey, and it's that trade-off, it's that balance between making sure those key things we want to measure, which is the activity, is reported correctly. And as I mentioned in my presentation, as soon as we add all those extra variables on the diary, it just adds to the burden and then impacts on the potential quality. And certainly very happy to support China if they want to reach out.
Thank you, Lisa. For sure, we will invite you to this workshop that our colleague mentioned. We rely on you as one of the key speakers there too. Patricia, back to you.
I think the collection is also one of the issue. The data are so good because we are so strict with how everything is being collected, but that's also what is so difficult and why our survey have a lower response rate than other surveys where you can just have multiple interviewers or none of the days being strict to be collecting. So this is one portion, and then really engaging the respondents, let them know what it's being used for. I think people don't understand because when they see this, they feel it's totally intrusive. They don't understand why, what is it that watching TV for a couple of hours would make as a difference. So it's very important to really engage the population and to reflect what is the importance. So we're always talking about unpaid work, unpaid care as being the main point for this survey. But why are we only capturing this? Why are we asking for all sorts of activities? So it's in that sense. I think we'll leave with lower response rate. I don't think we'll, unless it's becoming mandatory of some sort. So we have to do the best with what we have. And of course, I'll be more than happy to help China.
Yes, you will be part of that group too. Thank you so much. And we'll have other opportunities to further discuss all these important points. So thank you, Patricia, Lisa, and Samantha for your great interventions, and see you soon. Thank you. Thank you.